Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Dharmadhya Sayatam Vayaditaratarchate Swavigasvara. Tene Brahma Vidaya Adhikavaye Mojanti Jasuraya.
Tejo Varimidam Yata Vinimayo Yatrati Sargomisha.
Tejo Varimridha Jata Vinimayo Jatra Trisagamisha.
Damna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi.
Damna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O all-pervading personality of God.
O all-pervading personality of God.
I offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto you.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth.
And meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because of the absolute truth.
And he is the primeval cause of all causes.
And the primeval cause of all causes.
Of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes.
Of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji.
It is she only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge into the heart
the
of
original living being.
The original living being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
As one is bewildered by the illusory representations.
As one is bewildered by the illusory representation.
Of water seen on fire or land seen on water.
Water seen on fire, land seen on water.
Only because of him do the material universes.
Only because of him do the material universe.
Temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature.
Temporarily manifested by the reaction of the three modes of nature.
Appear factual, although they are unreal.
Appear factual, although they are unreal.
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna.
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna.
Who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode.
Who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode.
Which is forever free from the illusory representations in the material world.
Which is forever free from illusory representation.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
Dharma projita gaitravota.
Dharma projita gaitravota.
Paramo nirmatsaranam satam.
Paramo nirmatsaranam satam.
Vedyam vastavam atravastu.
Vedyam vastavam atravastu.
Shivadam tapa trayon bulanam.
Shivadam tapo trayon bulanam.
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite.
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni.
Kim vapurer ishwaraha.
Kim vapurer ishwaraha.
Sadyo hridi avarudyate.
Sadyo hridi avarudyate.
Krite behis sususubhistakshanat.
Krite behis sususubhistakshanat.
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
This Bhagavad Purana propounds the highest truth.
The Bhagavad Purana propounds the highest truth.
Which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
Which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
The highest truth, the reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
Such truth uproots the threefold mysteries.
Such a truth uproots the threefold miseries.
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity.
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by great sage Vyasadeva in maturity.
Is sufficient in itself for God realization.
Is sufficient itself for God realization.
What is the need of any other scripture?
What is the need of the other scripture?
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam.
As soon as attentively and submissively hears the message Bhagavatam.
By this culture of knowledge.
By this culture of knowledge.
The Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
This Supreme Lord is established within his
heart. Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam.
Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam.
Sukhamukad amrita dravya samyatam.
Sukhamukad amrita dravya samyatam.
Pibata Bhagavatam rasam alayam.
Pibata Bhagavatam rasam alayam.
Muhur aho raska bhuvibhavukaha.
Muhur aho raska bhuvibhavukaha.
O expert and thoughtful man, relish Srimad Bhagavatam.
O expert and thoughtful man, relish Srimad Bhagavatam.
The mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literatures.
The mature fruit of the desired tree of the Vedic literatures.
It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami.
It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all.
Although his nectarian juice was already relishable to all,
including liberated souls.
including liberated souls.
Shinvatam Swakata Krishna,
Srimad Bhagavatam Krishna,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Hridyantaksto hi Abhadrani,
Vidyantasto hi Abhadri,
Vidunati Suhitsatam.
Vidunati Sudipsata.
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
To hear about Krishna from the literature,
or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
or to hear from him directly,
is itself righteous activity.
is self-righteous activity.
And for one who hears about Krishna,
For when we hear about Krishna,
Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart,
Lord Krishna is dwelling within everyone's heart,
acts as a best-wishing friend,
acts as the best wishing friend,
and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
and purifies devotees constantly engaged in hearing.
Nasta presu abhadresu
Nasta place,
nityam bhagavata sevaya
Bhagavata Seva,
bhagavati uttamasloke
Bhagavati Uttama Sloke,
bhaktir bhavati naistaki.
Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
In this way, devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental
As
knowledge.
he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
and from the devotees,
and from the devotees,
he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
he becomes fixed in devotion.
Tadarajastamo bhava
Rajastamo Bhava,
kamalobhadayaschaye
Kamalobhadayascha,
cheta etar anavitam sitvam sattve prasidati.
Sitam Sadvi Prasiddhati.
By development of devotional service, one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance, and thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
And this material loss and average are
Evam
diminished.
prasana manaso
Evam Prasanna Manasu,
bhagavat bhakti yogataha
Bhagavat Bhakti Yoga,
bhagavat tattva vijnanam
Bhagavat Tattva Vijnana,
sangasya jayate. When these impurities are wiped away,
But these impurities are wiped
the
away.
candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness, becomes enlivened by devotional service, and understands the science of God perfectly. Vidyate hridaya grantis, chidyante sarvasamsaya, siyante chasya karmani,
Yante Sachakarma.
drista evatmanishware. Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection
So it's a hard with material
and
affection.
enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagram,
And enables one to come at some samagramam,
understanding of the supreme absolute truth, personality of Godhead.
understanding the supreme absolute truth, personality of Godhead.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotees in Krishna consciousness
can one understand the science of Krishna.
can one understand the science of Krishna.
Srimad Bhagvatam, Canto 2, Chapter 2, verse number 15. Stiram sukham chasanam astito yatir.
Stiram sukham cha samam ashtino yati
Yada jihasur imam angalokam.
yada jihasu imam angalokam
Kalicha desi chamano nasajayet.
kali chadeshe samano nasajayet
Pranam niyachen manasajitasu.
prana niyachen manasa jitasu.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. O King, whenever the yogi desires to leave this planet of human beings, he should not be perplexed about the proper time or place, but should comfortably sit without being disturbed, and regulating the life air, should control the senses by the mind. Purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. In the Bhagavad Gita, 8th chapter, 14th verse, it is clearly stated that a person who is totally engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord and who constantly remembers Him at every step easily obtains the mercy of the Lord by entering into His personal contact. Such devotees do not need to seek an opportune moment to leave the present body, but those who are mixed devotees, alloyed with fruitive action or empirical philosophical speculation, require an opportune moment for quitting this body. For them, the opportune moments are stated in the Bhagavad Gita, 8th chapter, 23rd to 26th verse. But these opportune moments are not as important as one's being a successful yogi who is able to quit his body as he likes. Such a yogi must be competent to control his senses by the mind. The mind is easily conquered simply by engaging it at the lotus feet of the Lord. Gradually, by such service, all the senses become automatically engaged in the service of the Lord. That is the way of merging into the Supreme Absolute. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So the verse 8:14, if I'm not mistaken, is Tasmat sarve sukale sumam anusmara yudhya maya arpitamano buddhir ami vaisasya samsaya. Let's see if that's right. 8:14. Oh no, I'm sorry. Nanyechet satatam yomam smarati nityasa tasyaham sulabha parata nityayuktasya yoginam. Sorry. For one who always remembers me without deviation, I am easy to obtain, O son of Prita, because of his constant engagement in devotional service. So here in this verse, there's a correlation between always remembering this Lord and being constantly engaged in devotional service. If we are constantly engaged in devotional service, we will always be remembering the Lord. So, the question is how to be constantly engaged in devotional service. The easy way to do that is always be in the association of genuine devotees. Then you'll always be engaged in devotional service. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, this verse especially describes the final destination attained by the unalloyed devotees who serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead in Bhakti Yoga. Previous verses have mentioned 4 different kinds of devotees: the distressed, the inquisitive, those who seek material gain, and the speculative philosophers. Different processes of liberation have also been described: Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Hatha Yoga. The principles of these yoga systems have some bhakti added. But this verse particularly mentions pure bhakti yoga, without any mixture of jnana, karma, or hatha. As indicated by the word ananya cheta, in pure bhakti yoga, the devotee desires nothing but Krishna. A pure devotee does not desire promotion in the heavenly planets, nor does he seek oneness with the Brahmajyoti or salvation or liberation from material entanglement. A pure devotee does not desire anything, or in other words, anything for his own sense gratification. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the pure devotee is called Niskama, which means he has no desire for self-interest. Perfect peace belongs to him only, not to them who strive for personal gain. Whereas a jnana yogi, karma yogi, or hatha yogi has his own selfish interests. A perfect devotee has no desire other than to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the Lord says that for anyone who is unflinchingly devoted to him, he is easy to obtain. A pure devotee always engages in devotional service to Krishna in one of his various personal features. Krishna has various plenary expansions and incarnations, such as Rama and Nrsimha, and a devotee can choose to fix his mind in loving service to any of these transcendental forms of the Supreme Lord. Such a devotee meets with none of the problems that plague the practitioners of other yogas. Bhakti yoga is very simple and pure and easy to perform. One can begin simply by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The Lord is merciful to all, but as we have already explained, he is especially inclined toward those who always serve him without deviation. The Lord helps such devotees in various ways. As stated in the Vedas, Katha Upanishad 1.2.23, Yam evaisya vrinute tena labhyas tasyasya atma vrinute tanum swam. One who is fully surrendered and engaged in the devotional service of the Supreme Lord can understand the Supreme Lord as he is. And as stated in Bhagavad Gita 10.10, Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam, the Lord gives such a devotee sufficient intelligence so that ultimately the devotee can attain him in his spiritual abode. The special qualification of the pure devotee is that he is always thinking of Krishna without deviation and without considering the time or place. There should be no impediments. He should be able to carry out his service anywhere and at any time. Some say that the devotee should remain in holy places like Vrindavana or some holy town where the Lord lived. But a pure devotee can live anywhere and create the atmosphere of Vrindavana by his devotional service. It was Sri Advaita who told Lord Chaitanya, wherever you are, O Lord, there is Vrindavana. As indicated by the words Satatam and Nitya Saha, which mean always, regularly, or every day, a pure devotee constantly remembers Krishna and meditates upon him. These are qualifications of the pure devotee for whom the Lord is most easily attainable. Bhakti Yoga is the system that the Gita recommends, above all others. Generally, the Bhakti Yogis are engaged in 5 different ways. Santa Bhakta, engaged in devotional service in neutrality. And then 2, Dasya Bhakta, engaged in devotional service as servant. 3, Sakya Bhakta, engaged as friend. 4, Vatsalya Bhakta, engaged as parent. And 5, Madhurya Bhakta, engaged as conjugal lover of the Supreme Lord. In any of these ways, the pure devotee is always constantly engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Supreme Lord and cannot forget the Supreme Lord, and so for him, the Lord is easily attained. A pure devotee cannot forget the Supreme Lord for a moment, and similarly, the Supreme Lord cannot forget his pure devotee for a moment. This is the great blessing of the Krishna conscious process of chanting the Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we see this is a very important verse. Ananya Chaita Satatam Yomam Smarati Nitya Saha Tasyaham Sulabha Partha Nityayukta Yogina. For one who always remembers me without deviation, I am easy to obtain, O son of Prita, because of his constant engagement in devotional service. So here we have a positive means to free ourselves from the whole cycle of birth and death. It simply have to be engaged all the time in devotional service. And you can do that from any position. You can be in a position of neutrality. You can be in a position of servant to the Lord. You can be in a position of a friend to the Lord. You can be in a position of a parent to the Lord, or in a position as conjugal lover of the Lord. From any position, you can attain liberation from the cycle of birth and death, liberation from the modes of material nature, liberation from time, and generally liberation from the material world, although you're still functioning in the material world. This is a specialty of Bhakti Yoga. You're still functioning in the material world, but you're liberated because everything you do is directed toward pleasing Guru and Krishna. To understand this very simple philosophy of life is not difficult. But the only obstacle, the main obstacle, is our false ego. Because we have to admit that there's someone who's greater than we are. We cannot be equal to him. We cannot be greater than him. We are always subordinate, and our constitutional position is to serve him. So most people will not accept that concept. And therefore, they have to make up some philosophy by which they reject the existence of God, reject the existence of a spiritual world, and just think that this material world is everything, that matter is everything, and anything beyond matter is not real. Only matter is real. Okay, so then Prabhupada says that such devotees do not need to seek an opportune moment to leave the present body. Because someone who's engaged all the time in Krishna's service does not have to worry about technical things like leaving the body at a specific time. And that is very technical, right? Well, Bhisma Pitamaha was like that. He left his body at a specific time, at the, what you call the period when the sun goes from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere. And he waited specifically for that particular time. But for regular devotees, it's not necessary because Krishna is always thinking of his devotee, and the devotee is always thinking of Krishna. So it doesn't matter what time you leave. It can be an auspicious time or an inauspicious time. Therefore it says, Abhyasa yoga yuktena chetasa nanyagamina paramam purusham divyam yati partana chintayam. He who meditates on me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path, he, O Partha, is sure to reach me. So, if we remain undeviated from the path of devotional service, then it's guaranteed that we're going to go back to Godhead. Yeah. So Prabhupada says, in this verse, Lord Krishna stresses the importance of remembering him. One's memory of Krishna is revived by chanting the Mahamantra Hare Krishna. So now we see why chanting all the time is so important. Because we can remember Krishna, and that is the perfection of life, to be always remembering Krishna and in connection to Krishna. By this practice of chanting and hearing the sound vibration of the Supreme Lord, one's ear, tongue, and mind are engaged. This mystic meditation is very easy to practice, and it helps one attain the Supreme Lord. Well, there it is. The devotee can constantly think of the object of worship, the Supreme Lord, in any of his features, Narayana, Krishna, Rama, etc., by chanting Hare Krishna. This practice will purify him, and at the end of his life, due to his constant chanting, he will be transferred to the kingdom of God. So, this constant chanting, some people will think, oh, why do you have to do that? Why can't you do something else, like yoga? Well, because if you love someone, you never want to forget that person. Just like sometimes when there's a funeral, the wife or the child of the person that dies, they say, we'll never forget you. You'll always be in our memory. Well, yeah, if you actually love someone, they're always in your mind. You're always thinking of them. So we develop that love gradually through associating with devotees who have faith, they're staunch devotees, and engaging in devotional service with such devotees. So therefore, if you're a devotee, your duty is to help others remember Krishna, right? That's your duty, because that's what you're supposed to do, and you're supposed to also encourage other people to do that. So the devotee can constantly think of the object of worship, the Supreme Lord, in any of his features. This practice will purify him, and at the end of his life, due to his constant chanting, he will be transferred to the kingdom of God. Yoga practice is meditation on the supersoul within. Similarly, by chanting Hare Krishna, one fixes his mind always on the Supreme. So the easy way to keep our mind on Krishna is by chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra. It's very simple. It's not complicated. You don't have to be a yogi in the sense of doing different exercises and meditating silently or whatever. Our meditation, or the ultimate meditation, is chanting the holy name of the Lord purely. The mind is fickle, and therefore it is necessary to engage the mind by force to think of Krishna. Well, it's not a difficult thing to always be chanting. That keeps the mind focused on Krishna. Now, there is such thing as inattentive chanting. That means that you be multitasking while you're chanting, right? Doing something that's completely unrelated to Krishna and at the same time chanting. But by focusing our chanting, so therefore that's why it's so important to try and do your rounds, your best rounds, early in the morning when there's no diversions. Nothing can take your mind away because everyone else is asleep, the telephone's not ringing, you don't have any appointments, 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning, right? You have one important appointment, that is chanting your rounds. So that's the best time, the Brahma Muhurta period, for getting your rounds done. Of course, they're never done because there's no limit to how many you can chant in a day. But at least the minimum rounds could be done. Okay, so then in the also in the 8th chapter, it explains the opportune moments for yogis to leave the body. But Prabhupada says, in 8th chapter, 27th verse, although the devotees know these two paths, those means the two paths for leaving that are opportune for leaving the body. O Arjuna, they are never bewildered, therefore be always fixed in devotion. So you have the path of light, beginning with the Makara Sankranti around the 12th, 13th, 14th of January, and going all the way up to the beginning of the Shrad period, sometime in September, October. So that's when the sun is in the northern hemisphere, and even during that period, it should be during the approximately 14 days or 15 days of the waxing moon, where the moon is increasing, not the waning moon, and during the daytime, and when there's maximum light. So that's like a most auspicious time to leave. And during the waning, or during the sun's trajectory in the southern hemisphere, and it's usually winter, and during the waning moon, when it's diminishing, and at night, those are the most inauspicious times to leave the body. But here it says, Krishna is here advising that he should not Krishna is here advising Arjuna that he should not be disturbed by the different paths the soul can take when leaving the material world. A devotee of the Supreme Lord should not worry whether he will depart by arrangement or by accident. The devotee should be firmly established in Krishna consciousness and chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. He should know that concern over either of these two paths is troublesome. The best way to be absorbed in Krishna consciousness is to be always dovetailed in Krishna's service. And this will make one's path to the spiritual kingdom safe, certain, and direct. The word yoga yukta is especially significant in this verse. One who is firm in yoga is constantly engaged in Krishna consciousness in all his activities. Shri Rupa Goswami advises, Anasaktasya vishayan yatarham upayunjataha. One should be unattached to material affairs and do everything in Krishna consciousness. By this system, which is called Yukta Vairagya, one attains perfection. Therefore, the devotee is not disturbed by these descriptions, because he knows that his passage to the Supreme Abode is guaranteed by devotional service. So this is preferential or special knowledge for devotees. We don't have to be concerned with all these technicalities of the exact time to leave the body, etc. The devotee can leave the body at any time, even if the devotee is in an accident. Because even if you can't remember the Lord at the moment of death, the Lord never forgets you and never forgets your service. Therefore, there's nothing to worry about as long as we're always engaged in devotional service. So then, in this purport, it says, but these opportune moments are not as important as one's being a successful yogi who's able to quit his body as he likes. Such a yogi must be competent to control his senses by the mind. The mind is easily conquered simply by engaging it at the lotus feet of the Lord. Gradually, by such service, all the senses become automatically engaged in the service of the Lord. That is the way of merging into the Supreme Absolute. So, this is also explained in Bhagavad Gita in the 4th chapter, where it says, Tyakva karma phala sangam nitya tripto nirashraya karmanya abhi pavritopi naiva kinchit karotisa. Abandoning all attachment to the results of his activities, ever satisfied and independent, he, the devotee, performs no fruitive action, although engaged in all kinds of undertakings. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, the freedom from the bondage of actions, meaning bondage of karma, is possible only in Krishna consciousness, when one is doing everything for Krishna. A Krishna-conscious person acts out of pure love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore he has no attraction for the results of the action. He or she is not even attached to his personal maintenance, for everything is left to Krishna. Nor is he anxious to secure things, nor to protect things already in his possession. He does his duty to the best of his ability and leaves everything to Krishna. Such an unattached person is always free from the resultant reactions of good and bad. It is as though he were not doing anything. This is the sign of akarma, or actions without fruitive reactions. Any other action, therefore, devoid of Krishna consciousness is binding upon the worker. And that is the real aspect of vikarma, or as explained herein. Okay, so vikarma means activities that don't have a karmic reaction. I mean, akarma means that. And vikarma is sinful activity. Okay, so basically, akarma is activity with no material reaction, just spiritual benefit. Then the next verse, so 420 and 421, says, Nirasir yatachitatma tyakvasar sarva parigraha sariram kevalam karma kurvanapnoti kilbasam. Such a man of understanding acts with mind and intelligence perfectly controlled, gives up all sense of proprietorship over his possessions, and acts only for the bare necessities of life. Thus working, he is not affected by sinful reaction. Okay, so these are very special verses. They're explaining akarma, being free of karma, and only having spiritual benefit. A Krishna-conscious person does not expect good or bad results in his activities. His mind and intelligence are fully controlled. He knows that because he is part and parcel of the Supreme, the part played by him as a part and parcel of the whole is not his own activity, but is only being done through him by the Supreme. When the hand moves, it does not move out of its own accord, but by the endeavor of the whole body. A Krishna-conscious person is always dovetailed with the supreme desire, for he has no desire for personal sense gratification. He moves exactly like a part of a machine. As a machine part requires oiling and cleaning for maintenance, so a Krishna-conscious man maintains himself by his work just to remain fit for action in transcendental loving service of the Lord. He is therefore immune to all the reactions of his endeavors. Like an animal, he has no proprietorship even over his own body. A cruel proprietor of an animal sometimes kills the animal in his possession, yet the animal does not protest, nor does it have any real independence. A Krishna-conscious person, fully engaged in self-realization, has very little time to falsely process any material project. For maintaining body and soul, he does not require unfair means of accumulating money. He does not, therefore, become contaminated by such material sins. He is free from all reactions to his actions. So there was this one devotee, I've spoken about him before, who was collecting a lot of money and giving virtually all of it to Srila Prabhupada so he could quickly build the temple in Vrindavan, Krishna Balaram temple. And he also donated or collected money for completing the temple in Mumbai, Glory of India. Okay, so, but some of the techniques he was using were illegal. And for a long time, Prabhupada didn't know that, but then many complaints were coming. And finally, Prabhupada, had a chance to address this. That devotee was always moving around in different countries, but he would come periodically to meet Prabhupada and give him a lot of money. And so when there was opportunity, Prabhupada questioned his methods of collecting money. And he basically cornered him. And the devotee admitted that he was engaging in some type of illegal activities. But it was a gradual thing. It didn't start like that, but it gradually reverted to that type of, or became that type of activity. So Prabhupada told him, immediately stop. Do not use any illegal means to collect money. Even if there's less money, that's okay. So I was staying in a room with this devotee once for a couple days, and I asked him this question. I said, did Prabhupada know that you were engaged in illegal activity to collect money? He said, no. He said, but when he asked me, I told him the truth. And he told me to stop. but I didn't. So what happened to that devotee after Prabhupada told him to stop? He continued, and he made a huge mistake, and he ended up in jail for 3 years in Holland. So he said, that was the biggest mistake I ever made in my life. I should have listened to him, but I secretly continued. So, you see, that's the whole point here, that he who is satisfied with gain which comes from its own accord, who is free from duality and does not envy, who is steady in both success and failure, is never entangled, although performing actions. This person directly ignored a direct instruction by Prabhupada. And what did it get him? It got him a jail term and lost his respectability. You know, there's a saying in the Bhagavad Gita, for one who has honor, dishonor is worse than death. In other words, worse than death is being dishonored once you've been honored. See? So that's what happened to this devotee, unfortunately. And therefore, we have to, as long as we're under the, let's say, protection of Prabhupada and Krishna, by following the rules and regulations strictly, we can do miraculous things. Things that we could not do ordinarily before. But as soon as we step out of that protective, let's say, shield, and begin to deviate, then there's no telling what's going to happen, because we're outside of the protection of the Guru and Krishna. So in this next verse, 422, it says, a Krishna-conscious person does not make much endeavor even to maintain his body. He is satisfied with gains which are obtained of their own accord. He neither begs nor borrows, but he labors honestly. Key word, he labors honestly, as far as is in his power, and is satisfied with whatever is obtained by his own honest labor. So he said it twice, honest. He is therefore independent in his livelihood. He does not allow anyone's service to hamper his own service in Krishna consciousness. However, for the service of the Lord, he can participate in any kind of action without being disturbed by the duality of the material world. That's a huge statement right there. We'll go over that in a minute. The duality of the material world is felt in terms of heat and cold, or misery and happiness. A Krishna-conscious person is above duality because he does not hesitate to act in any way for the satisfaction of Krishna. Therefore, he is steady both in success and in failure. These signs are visible when one is fully in transcendental knowledge. So, a Krishna-conscious person is above duality because he does not hesitate to act in any way for the satisfaction of Krishna. So, when we are beleaguered by dualities, we hesitate to serve Krishna directly. So we hesitate. But when we don't hesitate at all, and we're ready to do anything that's necessary for the satisfaction of Krishna, then we're no longer subject to duality. And another main point is that a advanced devotee does not let anyone's service hamper his own service in Krishna consciousness. Well, what does that mean? That means that sometimes people might put some obstacles in your path for performing your service, but the devotee is not disturbed by those things, and he quietly continues his service. or her service. So the dualities of the world are the things that bewilder people and puts them in a frenzy of doubt. But the devotee is free of that, of the influence of the dualities, heat and cold, happiness and distress, love and hate, war and peace, etc. Because the devotee does not hesitate to act in any way for the satisfaction of Krishna. But yet, also, he acts always honestly. And then the final verse that explains this, it says, the work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully situated in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. In other words, when a person is no longer influenced by goodness, passion, or ignorance, how do you become free of the influence of goodness, passion, and ignorance when everybody in the world is under the influence of these modes? Mam chayovi bicharina bhakti yogena sevate sagunam samatidhyaitan brahmabhuyaya kalpate. So this verse, 14th chapter and 26th verse. One who always engages in devotional service and never falls down under any circumstance transcends the influence of the modes of material nature and attains the position of Brahman, transcendental position where there's no more lamentation, there's no more hankering, there's neutrality, and there's equality. Becoming fully Krishna conscious, Prabhupada says, one is freed from all dualities and thus is free from the contaminations of the material modes. So, one time there were these two brothers, they're twin brothers, and they're British or English men, and they became devotees very early on in Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada told them, you just stay in Mayapur as pujaris, and never leave. That's what they've done. They're still there today, since they got that instruction 50 years ago. See? And they never got married either. They're still there. They're still doing their service that Prabhupada told them. They never thought, oh, maybe it would be better somewhere else. No. They always stayed because Prabhupada gave them that instruction. So this is mamchayo vicharina, that is, never deviating from service, always staunchly maintaining the service that Guru has given. So, it says, becoming fully Krishna conscious, one is free from all dualities and thus is free from the contaminations of the material modes. He can become liberated because he knows his constitutional position in relationship with Krishna, and thus his mind cannot be drawn from Krishna consciousness. So what does it mean, constitutional position? That means we're always engaged in the service of Krishna. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We are his eternal servant. And our purpose in life is to please the Lord through the instructions of bona fide spiritual masters. So that is the constitutional position of the living entity. That's where we belong. Consequently, whatever he does for Krishna, who is the primeval Vishnu. Therefore, all his works are technically sacrifices because sacrifice aims at satisfying the Supreme Person, Vishnu or Krishna. The resultant reactions to all such works certainly merge into transcendence, and one does not suffer material effects. So, this is a nice explanation of akarma and liberated action in this world, in this body. And we can all attain this position by strictly following Prabhupada's instructions, basically to always remember Krishna by chanting the holy name. So then, finally, it says, gradually, the mind is easily conquered simply by engaging it at the lotus feet of the Lord. Gradually, by such service, all the senses become automatically engaged in the service of the Lord. That is the way of merging into the Supreme Absolute. So we don't merge like the Mayavadis who give up devotional service or might not even take it up and just want to meditate. We are active always, and all our actions are directed toward pleasing Krishna in a bona fide way, not in a speculative way or a selfish way. So, yesterday we were talking about the laws of nature established by Krishna, and we went over a whole bunch of them. But I want to continue that a little bit more because it's a very interesting subject. And there are laws of material nature that govern the different social orders. Now, I wanted to read the ones that concern specifically the Kshatriyas. It says, this is Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, 20th chapter, 14th verse. This is to show how precise and how vast are the laws of nature that we have to follow. And being ignorant of them, ignorance, of course, is never an excuse. Being ignorant of them, especially due to modern education and peer pressure and all that nonsense, makes us a victim of our own ignorance. So here it says, to give protection to the general mass of people who are citizens of the state is the prescribed occupational duty for a king. By acting in that way, the king in his next life shares 1/6 of the result of the pious activities of the citizens. But a king or executive head of state who simply collects taxes from the citizens but does not give them proper protection as human beings has the results of his own pious activities taken away by the citizens, and in exchange for his not giving protection, he becomes liable to punishment for the impious activities of his subjects. Okay, so then in the purport, Prabhupada explains, the question may be raised here that if everyone engaged in spiritual activities to attain salvation and became indifferent to the activities of the material world, then how could things as they are go on? This is a very important question. You might be asking this question every time I say you don't really need to go to school. You can be educated perfectly by reading and being taught Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagvatam. School is more or less a waste of time. The real school is Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, an association of devotees and devotional service. So you would say, well, wait a minute, how's life going to go on if we just sit around and study Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam? Well, no, we don't just sit around. All day long we're engaged in devotional service, and one or two parts of the day is hearing and discussing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. So there's never just sitting around or lounging around doing nothing. 24 hours a day we should be engaged in devotional service. So this question, if everyone does this, how would things get done in this world? And then Prabhupada continues, and if things are to go on as they ought to, how can a head of state be indifferent to such activities? In answer to this question, the word Shreya, auspicious, is used here. The division of activities in society as arranged by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, meaning he's talking about the Varnas, the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras. In answer to this question, the word Shreya, auspicious, is used here. The division of activities in society, as arranged by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was not blindly or accidentally created, as foolish people say. The Brahmana must do his duty properly, and the Kshatriya, the Vaishya, and even the Sudra must do the same. And every one of them can achieve the highest perfection of life, liberation from this material bondage. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 18:45. Sve sve karmanya birata samsiddhim labate nara By executing one's prescribed duties, one can attain the highest perfection. Lord Vishnu advised Maharaj Prithu that a king is not enjoined to give up his kingdom and responsibility of protecting the prajas or citizens, to instead go away to the Himalayas for liberation. He can attain liberation while executing his royal duties. The royal duty, or the duty of the head of state, is to see that the prajas, or the general mass of people, are doing their respective duties for spiritual salvation. A secular state does not necessitate a king or head of state who is indifferent to the activities of the prajas. In the modern state, the government has many rules and regulations for conducting the duties of the prajas, but the government neglects to see that the citizens advance in spiritual knowledge. If the government is careless in this particular matter, the citizens will act whimsically without any sense of God realization or spiritual life, and thus become entangled in sinful activities, as we're seeing what's happening today. People are being terribly entangled in sinful activities all the time. An executive head should not be callous to the welfare of the general mass of people while he simply goes on collecting taxes. The king's real duty is to see that the citizens gradually become Krishna conscious. The Krishna conscious means completely free from all sinful activities. As soon as there is complete eradication of sinful activities in the state, then there will be no more war, pestilence. Pestilence would mean something like COVID-19, famine, or natural disturbances. This was actually prevailing during the reign of Maharaj Yudhisthira. If a king or head of the government is able to induce the citizens to become Krishna conscious, then he is worthy to rule over the mass of people. Otherwise, he has no right to levy taxes. If the king looks after the spiritual interests of the citizens, he can levy taxes without difficulties. In this way, both the subjects and the king will be happy during this life, and in the next life, the king will be able to share 1/6 of the pious activities of the citizens. Otherwise, by levying taxes on the sinful citizens, he will have to share the reactions of their sinful activities. The same principle can be applied to parents and spiritual masters as well. If parents simply give birth to children like cats and dogs, but cannot save their children from imminent death, they become responsible for the activities of their animalistic children. Lately, such children are turning into hippies. Similarly, if a spiritual master cannot direct his disciples to become free of sinful activities, he becomes responsible for their sinful acts. These subtle laws of nature, these are laws of nature. Every ashram, every varna is subject to laws of nature. Some of those laws are general, and some of them are particular to their varna or ashrama. These subtle laws of nature are unknown to the present leaders of society. Since the leaders of society have a poor fund of knowledge, and the citizens in general are rogues and thieves, there cannot be an auspicious situation for human society. At the present moment, the whole world is full of such an incompatible combination of state and citizens, and therefore there is constant tension, war, and anxiety as an inevitable result of such social conditions. So, not only should we follow the rules of our ashrama, but we should also follow rules of our varna. So, if a person wants to be a merchant or a businessman, their main duty is to protect cows and be charitable toward genuine brahmanas and Vaishnavas, right? and then whatever is related to cow protection, such as banking, such as all the regulated activities that have to be performed. So today we are seeing war, pestilence, anxiety, and famine, and natural disturbances. It's because the leaders of society are not taking responsibility. In fact, they say it's not our responsibility to help people become Krishna conscious, because we are a secular state. And we spoke about India's particular secular state understanding and the Western secular state understanding. So he said, and so they're rejecting their primary duty. And because of that, there's war, there's pestilence like COVID, famine, natural disturbances, and anxiety, and a lot of sinful activity going on in the name of democracy or secularism. So, therefore, if we're going to be a significant influence in society, meaning we, the Krishna conscious movement, we have to clearly articulate these points. There are the laws of nature cannot be ignored. They're established by Krishna himself. And they're more important than the laws of society. The laws of society, we can see, become so degraded that they're actually mandating sins like abortion and euthanasia and other activities that are sinful, and they're making them legal, right? So we have to learn these. That's why we're talking about it today. We have to learn these things and be able to explain to people why there is so much war, violence, drugs, pestilence, economic upturns, downturns, and so forth. We have to explain why this is happening. It's the trickle-down philosophy. If the leader doesn't know what is the purpose of life, what is his primary duty as a leader, and the gurus don't know, and the parents don't know, then it is a formula for disaster of the society and the people.